Hello, and welcome to the part two portion of the asynchronous interview. The first part with the lesson, hopefully you enjoyed that and found it illuminating. Let's go ahead and tackle these questions, and we'll see if they also offer some good insights. I think they do. So, first question. How do you set boundaries to maintain a good work-life balance with online learning? Excellent question. Before the pandemic, working from home wasn't really on the forefront of my mind. And I think that's probably true of most of us. Um, but I was given the opportunity to work from home. And not only was I at home, but my wife was home and my two children were also working at home. Not working, my kids were at school, but online. And so we had to figure out really quick the best way to work at home while not getting in each other's way. I found this space down here, and this became my classroom. And my children had their spot. My wife had her spot. Um, part of finding a work-life balance, when you're at work, you got to be at work. Um, and when you're at home, you got to have a place that's actually the classroom, and that was this area here. I had actually a green screen behind me so that I could have motion and different pictures for the kids, so which was fun. The other side of that coin is work has to have a specific time frame and a specific end time. When I was online, my parents and the students knew that there was open office time 7:30 to 8 and 4 to 4:30 every day without fail. And so they would be able to, if they had questions, they'd be able to come and ask those questions during that time. Outside of the mentor time, outside of class time, where they could just get my ear. And we'd be able to schedule that time for them, or they could just pop in. Also, I provided various ways for parents to get a hold of me. Texting through Google Voice, calling me through Google Voice, Class Dojo messaging, email, of course. So a lot of those ways were utilized by the kids and by the parents. But they knew that if they were to contact me after 4:30, I wasn't going to be available. And I think that's the most important thing. You want to set boundaries, you want to set expectations so that parents are aware of when they're able to contact you and when they're not going to hear from you. As long as that's understood, then there shouldn't be any problems. But you got to have that expectation so that you are separating when you're at work and when you're at home with your family. You got to have that wall. And I would say that's true even if you're in person. You got to have a set time when you decide you got to go home. I know it's not easy sometimes to do that, but you got to try. So that's number one. Number two, how important is it to me to feel valued and supported by the team? And how would I want to be addressed if there were concerns? It's important to be valued and supported by your team, as we all know. We can't do this alone. If you try to do it alone, you're going to be, if you're trying to be the lone wolf, you're going to be a sad wolf. And that's not nice. So you got to depend on your team. If you have issues with your team, then whether it's me or with someone else, I prefer to be confronted directly with respect, but but firmly, so that there's no misrepresentation, there's no confusion. There's a problem, come to me directly with respect, and I will do the same. But like I said, this is a team sport, teaching, and if we're not in it together, we're going to be in trouble. So we got to lean on each other for help in a variety of ways. And so I look forward to doing that with the online team as well. Certainly, it has been the case with most of the teams I've been on. All of the teams, actually, while I've been working in District 6. All right, number 3. What do you do when students are consistently not meeting learning outcomes in content area? Well, we got to look at data first. Data plays an essential role. It can identify which students are struggling and provide clues as to what remediation needs to be tried. It can also point to a direction on what you might be missing in your instruction as well. Also, if students are consistently not meeting their learning outcomes in a content area, we may need to bring the students back um, to a previous lesson, a precursor lesson, maybe in a first grade, second grade lesson, depending on what the situation is, and provide the basics back again so that we're at least covering any potential gaps that might be there. So when we're looking at remediation, that's certainly, we want to have as much of the data drive us, but also, you know, building that trust, that communication with the students is also going to play a big part in this. Talking with them, what is going on? What's the problem? You know, let's talk and see if we can troubleshoot what we need to do. So those are a few of the things that I would do with students that are consistently not meeting learning outcomes. So let's move on to number 4. Number 4, what procedures do you follow when planning and implementing interventions or remedial support? All right, so again, I begin with data, end with compassion and support. First, we look at the information that we have, formative, summative assessments, testing, that will help identify gaps in their understanding. That will help with remediation. For me, remediation, this could be a whole class reset that will take a fresh look at the standard as a class from another perspective. So we've taught it from one direction, but if the majority of the class, 75%, 80% of the class is not getting the concept, then we need to take a step back ourselves as educators and look at a fresh way to approach it. As a whole class remediation. But when we're talking about a small number of students that are struggling, we're looking at interventions and planning interventions. When we identify those students that are, based on the formative assessments and data and so forth, and when we identify where they're struggling, we need to look at setting up SMART goals for the students to really define clear objectives, which will help align with the standard and the goal. We need to look at focused small groups or one-on-one lessons to work on closing those gaps. Throughout, communication and understanding of the student's struggle is paramount to strengthen the trust, which leads to better communication, which leads to better understanding of the concept. It really does all tie in together. Let's see. Number 5. How would you respond to a challenging student? What about a student who will not reply or engage? So I certainly dealt with that in my time online. Responding to a challenging student, or as we say in whole brain teaching, a beloved rascal, it requires patience and communication. Online, beloved rascals have the power to shut their computer or just simply leave the area. And before they get to that point, we need to make sure we're establishing class rules and we're establishing the commitment of the learning coach and the commitment of the student as well. There would be classroom rules that would need to be followed and agreed upon. There would need to be commitments made, like I said, with learning coach. And once we have that level of understanding and behavior issues continue to arise, I would progress to the second level. Now, for me, it's called the bullseye game. This is a game that, and for me, a lot of what I do is based on games. I will call something a game because kids like games, and that gets them involved and interested in what you're doing. So this is the bullseye game, where the student needs to work with me to honestly identify where they're, where what we need to work on, um, and then take ownership of it. The way that works is with bullseye game is we first act out the rule that they may not be following at the beginning of the day, and then throughout the day we're going to ask, the question, how are we doing with that rule? Are you following that rule? And just to give them a reminder, by the end of the day, they sit back down with me and they need to grade themselves 1 to 5. 1 being didn't do a good job, 5 being I did pretty good job, I nailed it. And so we look at that rule, and the student gives themselves a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Let's say they give themselves a 2. They just did not hit it. They knew they were struggling. And I also give them a 2 or a 3. Well, they're right in line with me. They're taking ownership of their actions, and that's a good first step. And tomorrow, we don't necessarily need to do the bullseye game, but we want to make sure that we're paying attention to that rule and making sure, and if they're not, then reminding them, well, maybe we need to meet after school today to play the bullseye game again. Now, let's say that they aren't meeting. They grade themselves a 5 and I grade them a 2. Means that there is definitely a miscommunication here. He believes or she believes that they're doing something that I don't see. With that level of disagreement, then they have to do the game again tomorrow. Definitely do. But if they're on target, not only do they not need to do the game again, if they're evaluating themselves honestly, then they will get 2 dojo points that they get to award to a fellow student who they see as exemplifying that rule or that behavior. So not only are they taking ownership of their actions, but they're also being able to kind of give back to students who they know are doing it the right way. And so it allows them to not only take ownership, but also give back. And most of the kids actually enjoy that part of it a lot. They think about it and they really, really give it a lot of good thought as to who they're going to give those points to. So the bullseye game is very successful. Now, if the behavior continues and the bullseye game isn't working, um, and you do the bullseye game, at the end of the day, the learning coach is there with you. But if we're not achieving what we want with the game, then we go to the next level, and we determine a behavior plan with that student. And if they don't adjust their behavior, if they don't follow the behavior plan, then we need to look at, well, that's a few questions down, isn't it? We have to look at, is online learning the best environment for them? And I guess we're going to touch on that in a little bit for that level, maybe the third level of intervention. So let's move on to number 6. What is your philosophy in classroom practice for teaching conceptual mathematics through the discovery learning model in illustrative mathematics? So I feel that discovery learning, that discovery learning model is key with most math. Conceptual mathematics, number 1, and the discovery learning model go hand in hand. I think I am really set it up that way. My philosophy reflects my lifelong struggle with math. I learned to memorize math, memorize problems, memorize my tables, memorize algorithms without really understanding why. And I really struggled as I moved into those more difficult concepts. And that is what I'm going to try to avoid with my students by inviting them to discuss these concepts with each other and with me. Number talks are really important because it allows them to uh, have a discussion about how they arrived at a problem. But not only that, why they got a problem wrong. A lot of kids want to shy away from that. They want to say, I got this wrong. Um, I'm sorry. It's almost they're apologizing for getting a problem wrong. And I'm flipping that on its head. Getting a math problem wrong is what we want to do because then we get to correct that problem. And that's how we learn. Um, with the discovery learning model, it's all about discussion. It's all about um, not just using centers and so forth to get a better understanding, but working with your fellow classmates to better understand the problem. And conceptual mathematics ties right into that. It really is a better way to approach math, and it certainly falls right into my philosophy of discussion, learning the whys, learning the mechanics of math. 6 times 3 equals 18. We can memorize it, but do you know why? Um, that's in short what we need to focus on is that discussion with the students. So let's see. The more we talk, the more the teachers talk, the less the students learn. The more they talk, the more they're going to learn. That's my philosophy. All right. So discussion is good. Talking about it is better. Um, Number 7. At District 6 Online Academy, we ask parents to designate a learning coach, and there needs to be a learning coach agreement. What steps would you take if a student's learning coach is not following the agreement? Well, and that I have experience with as well. There's a clear delineation between those students that have a dedicated learning coach and those that don't. The ones that have that dedicated coach that are keeping them on task and working with them, helping them, even if they're struggling students, they're still going to do better than the ones that are just left out there to dry. And I had both situations in my online class where the learning coach for the struggling student didn't realize that that's what they needed to do. They didn't realize their role. Um, and, to that person's, credit, they realized that and they tried to do better. And, the learning coach was a child themselves, a senior in high school, but still, it was a lot to put on a person. And so, you know, most learning coaches, I would hope, know what they're getting into. But if they don't, you need to start the year with a conversation with the learning coach to make sure they do know what they're getting into. Um, Online learning is not going to work for every family. It's not going to work for every situation. Um, and it may not be apparent at the beginning of the year. But if a coach isn't involved, um, it's not, if they're not following the agreement, I believe the initial conversation after that's recognized has to be made with the coach, with the understanding that the commitment is required to be made with not with just the student, but with me. Um, it's a team, like I said, it's a team sport. In this case, the online learning coach is part of that team, and they need to be aware of that, and they need to be on board. And most are. It was not a common thing for me. I mean, there was 1 or 2 learning coaches that I needed to have a talk with. Now, let's say that you do have that talk and nothing changes. I think you need to treat them like the adults that they are. You give them a few chances, then you have to have the hard conversation to say, it doesn't look like this is working. Online learning may not be for this student. We may need to send them back to in-person learning. You got to do what's in the best interest of the student. And if the learning coach isn't able to do their part for whatever reason, there's no, there's no bad guy here. There may be, but we'll assume that there's no bad guy here. Um, you know, we need to figure out, okay, what's best for the student? What can we do to help them? All right, let's move on. How do you envision PBIS being implemented in an online environment? I incorporate Class Dojo, whole brain teaching, and PBIS from the school into one. Instead of star cards, which we use at Maplewood, I give students dojo points. When they get more and more dojo points, they get moved up on a super improver ladder that I have in my room. They move up animals. And I give dojo points out to those students that are improving, either in behavior or academically, socially. If we are working with one student, I tell the student, we're working today, you are working on following directions quickly. And when I see it, you get a star. Another student could be, we're working on your dibbles scores. And that's not a daily thing, right? So, when you improve on your score, then we're going to award you X amount of dojo points. And that's an agreement that you make individually with each student, but you also make with the class as well, because the class can also win dojo points. They can all together win it. But the beauty of whole brain teaching with the super improver ladder is that the kids are, in the end, they're competing with themselves. They all have different goals, and so they are not going to be able to compare themselves with another student because they all have different things that they're working on. But you're giving them stars for their improvement, and that's the key. Never taking away points. Don't believe in that. You're always giving them out. So that is kind of what, as far as PBIS is concerned. I combine that with Class Dojo in lieu of giving out star cards. We have dojo points, and I think it works very well. Students get really caught up in the game. Like I said, like to have those games in the classroom, and so it works out well for everyone, I think. All right, number 9. While we teach virtually, there will be in-person events with mandatory times to meet at the Greeley district offices. Can you make it? Yes, I can. I'm working in Greeley right now, traveling back and forth every day. So unless there is a family emergency, I don't foresee any reason why I wouldn't be able to do that. All right, so those are my questions that I've answered for you. Hopefully it provided further insight as to me as a teacher, and hopefully it is everything that you were wanting to hear. But if not, I'm always available for questions. All right, I'll sign off now, and you should see this available as a YouTube link, and I will see you later. I hope to talk to you soon. Bye.